On this episode of Into the Unknown, I am joined with Trace Browning. Trace is a freelance live production camera operator working for both the Wisconsin Badgers and the Milwaukee Brewers. Me and Trace first actually connected on Instagram, and with me being back in Wisconsin, I've had the opportunity to attend quite a few Brewer games this year so far, and me and Trace were actually able to meet in person not too long after we recorded this. That being said, there is definitely a disclaimer on this episode. When you imagine everything that could possibly go wrong in a recording goes wrong, that's what this was. Fortunately, I should say, we were able to get the recording. However, that being said, there was definitely issues that were beyond our control. Wisconsin happened to have a terrible storm that day, so you'll see during the interview, I lose power. I'm able to bring him back on my phone, and it wasn't pretty, but we made it work. We were able to get the last little bit of the interview done, and it's one of those things, anyone who's ever done live TV, one of the things is you just kind of roll with what's going on, and you make the best of it. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get into it. Today, I'm joined with Trace Browning. I'm so excited to have him here.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. Very honored to be here.
And I just want to jump right into it. Tell me a little bit about yourself, that comic book origin story, issue number 1.
That origin story probably be, I came from a very sports-heavy family. You know, as early as I can remember, I was playing sports, watching sports, whether that be, football, basketball, baseball, even racing, just anything that had some kind of a competitive nature to it. I was either involved in or I was watching it. And I think that's just the nature of the culture in Wisconsin, and just also just the way my parents were. I never really remember having the sit down with my parents of being like, oh, we're fans of this team. It just kind of happened. I just was in Wisconsin Badger stuff. I was in Green Bay Packer stuff. I was in Brewer stuff, probably from before I even knew what they were. So yeah, that kind of, that started very, very young. And then just as I got older, obviously I played sports for a little bit and just, didn't, was average at best, wasn't really going to go anywhere, but was thankful enough to get other opportunities to end up where I'm at now.
Trace, going off that, man, being from Wisconsin as well, I know exactly how that is. I always tell people I wasn't really someone who became a Packers fan. It's more like you always were. You don't really
Absolutely.
remember that time where you came and became a fan of your teams. It's your team for life, and that's pretty much how it works. And I'm okay with how that world works up here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree. And definitely echo that same exact statement that you just made, where it's just something that just happens.
Now that I know you're a Packers fan, I just got to ask, who's your favorite player?
Oh, that's a good one. I guess my heart's saying Charles Woodson, just because I enjoyed him even before he got to Green Bay. And I like to think, and I'm a firm believer, the Packers don't win the Super Bowl in 2011 without him. I mean, there's the obvious, of Favre and Rodgers, and you can't discredit what they have done for the franchise for the last 30 some odd years. But, that's the chalk pick, if you will. That's saying my favorite Bucs player is Giannis. Of course it is. He's the marquee guy. I would probably think Charles Woodson.
I love that, man. That's a unique answer. And like you said, there's the marquee answers, and then there's the chalk talk, if you will. And I'll keep moving on because I know I could talk Packers all day. I know you could talk Packers all day. Let's fast forward a little bit. You said you love sports. You grew up watching it. What drew you into what you're doing now? How did that actually happen?
It was one of those things that kind of just started randomly. And then once I started doing it, I was like, hey, this is a lot of fun. I'm going to see if I can take this somewhere. So it literally was just had the most innocent of starts of my dad won this, remember those old flip cameras from the mid to late 2000s, those really cheap, skinny, small cameras that were they weren't great, but they were super portable. You could stick them in your pocket. They looked like a smartphone basically. My dad won a camera similar to that in a work raffle, and my younger brother was playing in a state or in a tournament, basketball tournament. I think it was in lacrosse. It was one of those, like, not AAU, but it was a travel team. So, like, he had to try out to be on it, and you had to pay and a little. So it's, it's a little. It was a little bit more curated than a WIA high school basketball team. And I just decided, hey, I'm gonna take this camera with me. We'll see what happens. He ended up, I want to say it was the game before the state championship game. He ended up getting in, and my brother scored, I think, was 9 or 12 points in a row all by himself as a power forward.
Wow.
And I just happened to have the camera on me. I was shooting, and I was like, hey, this is a lot of fun. Somehow then word got to the boys basketball coach at my high school. I was a freshman at the time. My brother was in 7th grade. Somehow the word got to the high school basketball coach that I went and did this, and he's like, hey, I'm looking for a kid to do coach's tape for me for next season. I'm like, sure. Sounds like it could be fun. And then that word got on to the football coach, and he's like, hey, I need a second guy come next fall. So winter of my sophomore year, I started with the boys basketball team. Then the fall of my junior year, I started with football and was able to still run cross country at the same time. So I made that kind of work for a little bit, where I would run cross country and then go do the football games on Fridays. And then I went full send on everything my senior year. I quit cross country. I was like, I'm done with this. I had no intentions of even running in college. I knew I was going to be done once I graduated. I had no intentions of playing in college. So, like, I'm going to lean into this. We'll see where it takes me. I ended up staying with the football team for an extra 2 years because my brother was the quarterback starting his junior year, so the year after I had graduated. So I knew I was going to go to the games anyway because my younger brother was going to be the starting quarterback. And the coach was like, I know you're going to be here. Liked having you for the last 2 years. Why don't you just stay for the next 2 for your brother? And like, sure. And they offered to pay me. So the first 2 obviously, they were basically an internship, but I got varsity letters out of it. The guys were all really nice in making me feel like I was a part of the team and all that other kind of stuff. So that, that had a fun little added benefit to it that wasn't necessarily looking for. So then that led me to METC. I knew I wasn't a good enough student to get UW-Madison. I knew I wasn't going to really get what I wanted to out of going to a 4-year school. So I was like, we'll just go to METC. We'll see what happens. Week 1 at METC, I get an email from a childhood friend of mine who was working for the video board at Wisconsin at the time. She goes, hey, I know you're going to school for video. We're hiring right now. Here's my boss's email. I'm like, okay, sweet. So I sent him an email. I sent him a couple of the really crudely made highlight tapes that I had at the time and gave it a shot. I mean, I'm a guy coming from coach's tape applying for a live production position. Like, I had no shot. And he called me in for an interview 2 days later, hired me on the spot. And then 2 days after that, I'm standing on the sideline at Camp Randall looking around going, how in the heck did I get here? Was given a live production job with 0 live production experience. I had, never done any form of a live stream at all. Everything I had done was literally just, push record, pan the camera back and forth, and then hand the tape off to the coaches. So then from there, it was just basically, starting on the ground floor and climbing my way up as an 18-year-old kid, tracking out-of-town scores of other football games that were going on at that time and switching over the Blu-ray records. And then that turned into being a utility for the chords for some of the games. And then literally, as metaphorically as it sounds, it was literally just step up the ladder, step up the ladder, step up the ladder until I got to where I am now, almost 12 years later.
I love that, Trace. And here's the thing. I realized, and I think you realized too, that path you're stepping on, you keep going forward. Of course, if someone told me that's what I had to do is to get where I wanted and what I wanted, everyone would do it. That path, straight and narrow path, is one of the easiest.
Yeah.
I'm sure for you it wasn't. Can you give me some examples of maybe some adversity you faced on that journey?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was once I started getting more confidence in myself and in my abilities, I was starting to feel slighted if I wasn't getting opportunities that I felt like I deserved when maybe I hadn't earned them. So, I guess I was putting the cart before the horse, if you will. And, I was ready to move on maybe before I was actually ready to move on. I was sitting there at 19 being like, all right, give me that handheld. Like, I want to run a handheld for football. And I wasn't ready for it, but I felt like I was ready. I think a lot of it was, and even still is to this point, because I'm in an interesting spot of, I had this experience, but I'm still on the younger side of an industry where you can work till you're 60 or 70. I'm even still now to this day find myself sitting in a position where sometimes I'm like, I'm better than that guy. I'm better than that guy. I'm better than that guy. But I'm also forgetting that they've got 40 years on me. So part of why they're in the spot that they're in is because they've been doing this longer than I've been alive. They paid their dues. They took the time. So I'm even, like I said, even still to this day, I'm still finding myself in that spot of, I have almost 12 years of experience, but I'm still only 28, almost 29 years old. Like, I still have 30, 40 plus years in this industry. It's just my time's going to come and I just have to wait for it and just continue to find ways to improve while also not being complacent and just kind of patiently waiting my time.
Trace, I love that you said that, man. I completely understand being in the museum field. A lot of curators, as a curator, as an archivist, a lot of times they remind me they've been doing it longer than I've been alive. And I think at first you take that as a little bit of slight, but I don't think it is. I think it's just them reminding you have to learn. You have to, as you mentioned, pay your dues and gain that experience. I think it's invaluable, even though one of the things is I'm sure the technology continues to change over the years, but there's still principles and ideas that you can learn and take from, I really argue, anyone you meet.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree. I mean, one of, to that point, one of the longtime camera operators on the broadcast side for the Brewers is a gentleman by the name of Woody. He's an older guy. I want to say he's in his late 60s, maybe early 70s. He was one of those guys that once I started for them last season was kind of that, that old figurehead that kind of like, grabbed me and was like, come here, kid, and there was a couple things, he never was like, anytime he'd offer me any advice, it was one of those situations where he was going to come to you and offer you advice one-on-one. It was like you shut your mouth, you nod your head, you say, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. One of those types of things, because everything he was saying was coming from a good place and was coming from a spot where he meant very well. And he's trying to, show me the ropes in an industry that is sometimes notorious for chewing you up and spitting you out. Because there are a lot of guys that maybe get a little bit of power and they're just like, get the hell out of here, kid. You don't know what you're doing. So, yeah, I mean, to what you were saying, I absolutely give a lot of credit. There's a lot of people that I have to give a lot of credit to who were more than willing to pass on their knowledge to me and not feel like they had to keep it from me because this kid's coming from my spot. They just know that that's how the business works. And I've started to realize that myself now that I'm getting older and still working for UW, where we have the student base. And I'm battling now the other side of looking at some of these students that are coming in and going, this kid's pretty good. He's coming for my spot. It's like, no, he's not. Like, that's your part of the job. Like, when you started, when you were in his age, you had people that did that for you. So now it's your turn to pay it back. And I think that's something that you kind of have to realize on your own.
Trace, I love that you said that. It's one of those things, learning from people. And I think on our path, on our own journeys, there's people who help us along the way. Sometimes they stay only, a short season, literally, for in the industry we're in,
Yep.
but also just people have helped you down the road. Who are some of those people that helped you?
Yeah, so a lot of them are, I'm not sitting where I am today without a couple of guys from UW, John Duxbury, Tommy Matthews, Eric Zitsky, Ken Labar. Those are probably four guys that they got to me very, very early. They got the very green, never been in a live production broadcast version of Trace. And they were, instrumental in making me who I am. I tell everybody I'm not here if it's not for those four. They were all very integral parts of the early stages of my career, of grabbing me and, showing me even the most basic of stuff to the most advanced stuff. And they were all guys that were, if you have any question at all, even if it's no matter how stupid it is or how stupid you might think it is, ask. Like, they were the guys that showed me, hey, this industry, once you get to a certain point, is all about paying it back. And then it's even still now, as I've advanced, like I said, once I got to the Brewers last summer, the broadcast side of the Brewers last summer, Woody, Dan Gibbons, Nick Miller especially, he is the current RF guy. And I've kind of been, tapped in a way to kind of be his successor once that time comes. So that's, it again goes back to the earlier conversation of, it's an interesting spot of like, I can see it, like it's sitting there, I have the opportunity to have a camera for potentially 81 home baseball games, but there's still a guy, I'm the Jordan Love, let's say, I've been drafted, I've been tapped, like I know, Nick knows, I'm the next guy. I just have to wait my time. Well, I would definitely say without those seven guys, I'm not where I am today.
Jump back in. Lost power here. It's stormy in Wisconsin right now, but we're rolling with it. As anyone does, about live TV. Things happen.
Yep, absolutely. That's a perfect analogy. Yep, stuff happens. You got to be ready for it.
Well, speaking of being thrown curveballs, is there any experiences you've had where you've kind of had to switch up the script while working?
Yeah. I mean, I think, some of the pretty obvious ones or ones that jump to mind might be if we say have a t-shirt toss or a dance cam planned for the end of an inning and Brewers give up 15 runs.
As you can see, we lost some power. I'm sure we'll be talking soon. Thanks again for being on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. Glad to be here.